are joined by Sir Gavin Williamson, MP, who has to be back in the House of Parliament by 10 to 10.
10 to 10.
Or the whips will be after him.
Yeah.
So again, a huge thank you for making that effort. We've got borough, district and county councillors. A welcome to you all. May I begin by saying what this meeting is not. It's not a parish council and therefore is not constrained by formal regulations. It is, however, a fact-finding exercise engendered by the experiences of councillors in Stowe by Chartley in response to a planning application for a solar farm in the hamlet of Droynton, and the subsequent application for a separate solar farm in the same hamlet. If granted, this would mean that in the region of 80% of Droynton would be covered by solar farms. Planning permission has already been granted for solar farms in the locale, and rumour has it, that's why you're here, that there are many more in the pipeline across different planning authorities. We have become concerned at the cumulative effect of these developments. My understanding is that there is no regional planning authority and that each parish council and planning authority is restricted solely to its own remit. We ask the question, do other parishes in Staffordshire share our concerns, and are there ways in which these can be developed to involve bodies which can look at the wider view? My thanks go to Cloudy IT, who've sponsored this meeting and the online coverage. They are the online digital company who support over 300 councils in the management of digital presence and cloud storage. Particular thanks go to Ryan and his daughter, who have travelled from Buckinghamshire this evening to make everything work. So we hope it does. May I ask you to turn off your mobile phones? I think that's the thing one should always say at the beginning of a meeting. Avoid using the Wi-Fi for the village hall. Hopefully there'll be a recording of the meeting available on request. People joining us online can use the chat button to leave a message for us. Now, can I welcome the speakers? Sir Gavin Williamson actually put together a tape for us to play, but we're not going to play that because it's better to come from the horse's mouth, if I may say that. Victor Kelly of the Staffordshire Parish Councils Association, who again, we're delighted that has shown the interest to come, because I do believe it's something that affects us all. Philip Atkins, OBE. Where's Philip? Oh, man. Former leader of Staffordshire County Council, and again, we'll listen to what you have to say, sir, with considerable interest. Hannah Barter, Urban Vision Enterprise, who will join us on, and I'm hoping that she is there. Hannah is the expert on planning. Peter Atkins, MBE, Order of St John, Chair of Blithfield Parish Council, who, as many of you will know, have had a solar farm allowed within the area. Ben Adams, the Police and Fire and Crime Commissioner, is here. If you're sick bed, I hear, sir. You're very welcome, because you've not been well, I hear.
I'm fine.
Thank you for joining us. Michael Dodson, Stafford Borough Councillor and Farmer. Michael?
See you. I'm here.
Thank you. Edward Holcraft, local resident, HGV driver and farm advisor. We are particularly interested in his HGV qualifications because of the lanes around here are a little narrow, and I'm sure Edward will speak to that. And Eunice, MD of Amerton Farm and a parish councillor at Stowe by Chartley. So you're most welcome. You have 3 minutes, and I shall time you carefully. And sir, you're going to set us off, if you would.
Brilliant. Thank you ever so much. Great challenge for any politician to be succinct and to the point. So I will do my very best. Can I just say thank you for organising this? And as I went round the room and spoke to so many people, what became clear is this is not just an issue in Droynton or Stowe by Chartley. It's actually not just even an issue just in Staffordshire. It's actually an issue right across the country. And last week there was a debate about solar farms, and you had many people contributing, myself included. And what was clear is there's an element of hypocrisy. Because actually everyone says, well, we want green energy, or the government says we want green energy, but you had government MPs saying we want green energy, this is fantastic. But when you pushed them as to whether they were willing to accept them, well, they go, well, we've got a totally urban constituency and it needs to be put into fields, not anywhere else. The point I made at that debate, and the point that you, Mr. Chairman, have already alluded to, is there is no consideration made to cumulative effect of these developments. And this is a real problem. And it's a real problem for Staffordshire. It's also, and may I suggest it might be also worth reaching out to similar campaign groups, and I can happily try and find out if there's similar campaign groups in Lincolnshire and other areas where there are key sort of grid networks where you're getting an accumulation of development. But when the planning inspector looks at this, they do not look as to whether a village has had one development or two developments or even three developments. They can almost be ringed by developments, but they're almost nodding them through regardless of what that cumulative impact is. And this is something that needs to change. I think the approach of understanding that actually one parish council on its own is not going to be able to deliver the change is absolutely right. This is something that we have got to do together with many voices speaking as one, right across the political divide. Doesn't matter who your MP is, whether you're Conservative or whether you're Labour. We need to be saying quite clearly that actually this isn't good for our countryside. And the long-term impacts of this is going to be very significant. There's no clarity as to how these products, when they reach their end of their life, are going to be recycled. And I put the challenge there. Are the people that own these sites going to readily accept that they go back to farmland? I hear a lot about how grazing of sheep agriculture can still happen when they're advocating it. Or are they going to say that these are brownfield sites and you have a creeping urban expansion through the back door? And I would say it's more likely to be the latter than it is to be the former. As a member of Parliament for Stowe, Great Worley and Penkridge, all I can say to my constituents is I'm here to support in any way that I can. I've spoken in the House of Commons about it. I'm quite happy to be a sort of constantly challenge Ed Miliband, because I think he has quite simply got the policy completely wrong. He's an ideologue. He does not care about rural communities. He said he was going to knock £300 off your bill. I read today that it's going to go up by £200. I'm not sure if he studied economics or maths, but that doesn't seem to be going in the right direction. But he is an ideologue on this. And we've got to be making a broader point, a broad political point, but also about how this is going to be devastating for communities. And I'm here, Mr. Chairman, to do anything I can do to support you and all those others in making that point and getting that across to government in any way that I can do.
I'll shut up.
That was superb.
Sorry if I went over.
That was 5 minutes, so everybody's going to be cut.
So I do apologize.
Don't, you came specially. Victor, follow that, I think, is the expression.
Thank you, Gavin. I'm Councillor Kelly from South Staffordshire. I'm also chairman of the SPCA. SPCA is Staffordshire Parish Councils Association. A lot of you councils are registered with the organisation. We are the government body that can help on these sort of matters in getting contact with MPs and putting motions for these sort of planning applications to be debated more at Parliament level. So get in touch with your county officer, who would be your SPCA executive officer, and he can easily come to the executive meeting and put your concerns across. It is the best way for you to put your concerns on the issue of BESS, as well as solar farms, South Staffordshire has been hit with many applications. I've got colleagues here from South Staffordshire, and we are inundated with planning applications. And the latest ones that are coming up now are these micro storage battery units, which are a new phenomena. And the problem is the planning applications, there's no planning rules in them. So we've got to make sure via our organisation, we can get planning regs put in to prevent these sorts of things just being urbanised all over the country. Thank you.
No, thank you. I think it's your turn.
Is it my turn? Okay, 3 minutes. I've set the clock going. When I was county council leader, we brought in we had a wind farm coming in Lichfield, so I had to bring in some sort of advice. We're not the planning authority, but we can do advice. And the advice was about the height of these wind turbines and the amount of wind turbines that were in one place. So I'm not against anything that's environmentally green, but there's a time and a place, and to have many of them in one place is not the right thing for Staffordshire, particularly in somewhere like the Moorlands. So we have got a couple down at Robertson, and they are as they are. That I amended to a bit of advice on solar farms, and it's very much the same. It's about the mass, where they are, and whether they affect the local communities. The next thing I need to talk about is that bodies like the CPRE, and I'm the vice president of it for Staffordshire, and I encourage you to join. I've got policies about rooftop solar and brownfield solar, rather than it on greenfield sites. It's a fact that we've got to double food production from 2010 levels by 2050, and we're already well on the way. So if you start building these on farmland, you're going to take that ability away. So there's a big debate going on at the moment about what land should grow where and when. There's another little thing that nugget in the whole debate of policies, and that is the national grid. The national grid has had to change very rapidly from a distribution network from big power stations fired by coal into something that's collecting power from all over the place, from these solar farms and off your roofs and everything else. You need, if you've got an electric car and a heat pump, 19 kVA. They're talking kVA, which is a theoretical kilowatt. 12 for the heat pump and 7 for your car. Now, at the moment, your house won't have that. And the amount of power that you've got coming off your roof going back into the grid doesn't work. Nuclear is the solution in green energy. Obviously, there's a highly politically charged environment about where these power stations are placed. There's an issue about Rolls-Royce and the mini reactors and the security of the places where they have the mini nuclear power stations. I think I've covered everything in the 3 minutes, but if there's anything anybody like to ask, it's up to the government. County councils can't do it. It's the local planning authority and you who have to make your voices heard.
Thank you very much. See, there's space for questions later on. Is it possible to speak to Hannah Barter, or rather her to speak to us? Ryan?
Yes, I can join you now if you'd like.
It's your turn with 3 minutes. You're very welcome.
Lovely evening all, and thank you for accepting me to join you from sunny North Staffordshire virtually this evening. I come with good news, I think is what they say, and perhaps by the end of this evening, we can give you the confidence of how you can move forward. The first thing that I wanted to cover in my 3 minutes is what you can do now when you have live planning applications. And as we've touched on this evening with solar and battery energy storage systems, so what are the material planning considerations for planning applications? And as Sir Gavin related earlier, it's the concern about whether these are brownfield sites in the future. That certainly is my concern as a planner for the battery energy storage systems, because they do constitute previously developed land once they've ceased, not so much for the solar. So running from the top, we've got national planning policy, and the new NPPF framework came out in December last year. And so that, whilst it puts the foot firmly in supporting sustainable and green energy, it also recognises that there needs to be a consideration of those impacts that we've been looking at together tonight, and about protecting local environments and heritage and natural places. Then of course our local plans, for many of us, and particularly here in Stafford Borough tonight, we're in the unfortunate situation where the local plan is out of date, and so they haven't developed policies in detail to deal with the cumulative impacts and some of those material considerations. So we're sort of fighting them on the back foot, but that's something that Stafford Borough will look to change with their emerging local plan. But here's the good news: some of you in Staffordshire have already embarked on neighbourhood plans, and I can see virtually some of you are here tonight that have them. And some of our neighbourhood plans that we have prepared have exactly addressed that cumulative impact issue and prepared clear planning policy tests, because we've recognised when one starts, then there's the desire for the second and the third, and it's what is the cumulative impact, not only on the physical environment, but in terms of our highways and things like that, that we'll explore tonight. So neighbourhood plans really are your key, and that came with the previous government. So we really thank them for bringing that programme forward and really empowering communities that we see. Agricultural land, of course, some of it's protected by Greenbelt, and we've got best and most versatile, but food security is absolutely one of those issues that you can bring in as a material consideration, as well as things like landscape and visual impact, or Abby has kindly popped in the chat, which will be available in the digital notes later, about the impacts of ecology and biodiversity. I also have a great free mapping tool that I'll pop into the chat from Friends of the Earth that shows all the places that actually have connectivity and where solar and wind could potentially go, but it excludes best and most versatile land, I think, green belt, areas of outstanding natural beauty, conservation areas. So it does a lot of that searching directly, and using extracts from free mapping tools like that can be very helpful and empowering for your representations. And then of course it's thinking about issues like glint and glare, you know, when they're physically there, what is the harm that they could cause, or are they well screened, have they retained the trees and hedgerows and boundary treatments, so that's pretty limited. And as I've touched on before, we've got things like heritage, so your listed buildings, scheduled monuments, conservation areas. Read all of their documents. They can feel like an insomniac's cure sometimes, but the devil is in the detail. And so you really need to get to grips with the submission documents to find out where the chinks are potentially in their armour, or equally things that you might want to support. And as we'll cover this evening together as well, we're looking at things like flood risk and drainage. How does that work on some of these sites? And then, of course, access and transport, particularly for the best systems, because they require very often 24-hour operation. So somebody has to remain on site. So that really is quite an urbanising impact. And as Michael, one of our speakers, will cover this evening, is about grid connection. And this is something as planners we don't always appreciate. So we're really requiring people to come forward and say whether it is even physically possible, or if those capabilities are there. And then if things are granted permission, it's to recommend that conditions are put in, that they are temporary in nature, and that they have decommissioning plans as part of their conditions to discharge. So it's a run from the top. I will make some notes so that you have a little takeout of my top 10 tips, but they are: look at the DEFRA interactive map, look at the Friends of the Earth interactive map, and use those extracts to help you build your arguments either way. Help your local authorities prepare their local plans, tell them what those issues are with those schemes as they come forward, and if not, do it yourselves through a neighbourhood plan.
Hannah, thank you very much indeed. I know that you are time limited this evening, so hopefully questions for you can come back fairly early on, but thank you very much for that. Peter Atkins,
Do you want Steve first? You think,
Oh, I think-
he thinks
is
you've
he-
missed him?
is he better?
I think he's missing. Yeah, he jumped over me.
I was going on another list.
Yeah, I think you were thinking that. Breeze, I'll introduce myself. I'm a local farmer, but I actually spent 20 years in the accountancy trade, so qualified as a chartered accountant. So that was my background originally. So apologise, there's going to be a few finance numbers in, but I'll keep it very simple. Farmland's worth between £10,000 to £12,000 an acre. Solar companies are willing to pay around £1,350 per acre rent for a year, over 40 years. So 54,000 total. They say they'll improve the land. Why don't they buy it? You've got to ask that question. Why don't they buy it? They say we have the decommissioning professionally assessed. But you look at the agreements, they're quoting no more than £10,000 per megawatt. That's covering about 3 acres. The typical 50 megawatt scheme will see 2,800 truckloads of materials delivered to site. That's fact based off local applications. What goes in must come out. Panels at the moment go to landfill. Okay. The ground has to be restored. You're looking at 56 lorry loads per megawatt or £178 per truck. I say not possible to do the decommissioning for that. Every site is ring fenced in a separate limited liability company to contain income, costs and liabilities. There's no return on capital for decommissioning for a shareholder. At the end of a life, it can be bankrupted and site abandoned. Look at Wally's Quarry. Different industry, same principle. Many will not even settle the basic £10,000 per megawatt fund until 20 years in, when the first set of panels are at end of life, enabling an early cost-free exit should they choose it. Planning meetings focus heavily on biodiversity net gain. Reports list the gain from planting a few trees and a few metres of new hedging. The destruction of existing nature corridors within unfenced existing hedges by sheep grazing is always ignored. And believe me, they can be destructive. I know what they're like. Solar farms are a golden goose for the planning authorities, delivering planning fees of 100,000, typically for those sites, and annual rates bills of a similar level, 100,000 per year. A report I've seen on the internet, and you can't always trust everything, but it's the best I've seen so far, for the US Department of Energy, suggests the cost of decommissioning ground-mounted solar was approximately $368,000 per megawatt, which in GBP terms, 94,000 per acre, 235,000 per megawatt. Put that to your local solar companies who are playing around here. None of them are willing to comment on it. Lifetime site rentals after tax typically total 30,000 per acre, which is a £64,000 shortfall compared to what it's going to cost to clean it up, if that report is correct. So a 50 megawatt site for the decommissioning could be as much as £14 million, and the land's worth about 2 million in today's money. The obligations to decommission exist legally in the rental contract between the solar company and the landowner, no one else. Many solar companies are rooted in tax havens, including Bermuda. Solar profits are sent abroad by way of dividends and management charges, and the UK tax take is minimised. The focus is on financial return, not giving the UK greener, cleaner, cheaper energy. If the solar company and landowner walk away from the clean-up, who picks up the tab? The rates bill or the corporate taxes won't cover it, and taxpayers will have a nuclear scale clean-up bill to fund. Solar is a high reward, high risk investment from the landowner's perspective, in the words of a local land agent. If this trend continues, we will see across the country 270,000 acres covered in solar panels, which could become an industrial wasteland in 40 years' time. The agricultural land area has fallen by 3 million acres since the 1980s to 42 million now. arable land fell by over 2 million acres to 15 million, with 0.3 million acres now used to grow energy crops. At the same time, our population has grown from 56 million to 68 million. So our land is expected to produce 40% more food to maintain the same level of self-sufficiency from the 1980s. And I don't think there's the actual efficiency gains to be made in agriculture to achieve that. Grass grown in the shade is unpalatable, sour, lacks the sugars from sunlight. Believe me, stock don't like to eat it. I know from my own farm. The solar spin that sheep will thrive under panels is a myth. Mushrooms and rhubarb thrive in the dark, not grass and sheep. We all need power for modern day living. More importantly, though, we all need food to live. Food is not produced on a supermarket shelf. Many have lost sight of that.
Thank you very much, sir. Peter, I think it is your turn now.
Thank you, Chairman. Most of us this evening are here representing people who are, in my opinion, dedicated to preserving our way of life and to spend it in a rural environment, which we enjoy. And you all chose to look after those interests by standing as a councillor, volunteering, being pressured into being clerk to a parish council. When our way of life is threatened, we defend it. And that's what we did in Blithfield Parish. And I'm sorry to report, we failed. I don't think we did a bad job opposing our solar farm. We did all the right things. We consulted our parishioners, we held public meetings, we followed up suggestions, and I felt quite confident without being too confident in representing our case against before East Staffordshire Borough Council's Planning Committee. It's really, really interesting. You can see that on video on YouTube. East Staffordshire Borough Council Planning Committee, 25th of March. It's a fascinating 1 hour, 34 minutes of nonsense. But I confess I missed two important matters when I appeared. The political makeup of the council members of the committee and the professionalism of the young man representing the very profitable power company applicant which trades around the world. When I did my 3-minute spot, I think I covered all the salient points, and I highlighted in our small parish, we're only 230 odd people, that we had 10 working farms. That's a hell of a lot of working farms in a small parish. I am, however, a little naive in not for 1 minute thinking about the diktats issued by the Secretary of State for Energy, Ed Miliband, to the party faithful, the lack of concern for rural areas by those councillors on the planning committee who basically represented urban dwellers in East Staffordshire Borough Council's area. A good lot of thought to this since the chairman's casting vote made the decision 6 votes to 5 in favour of the application. As an aside, I'm also delighted to just tell you that he failed to get elected to Staffordshire County Council recently. Is there such a thing, which brings me to, is there such a thing as a professional advocate who specialises in protecting the countryside? Surely in this hall tonight, or through the Parish Council Network and the SPSA, or through Gavin, we must be able to find such a character or an organisation. And then we come to how do we pay them? It won't be cheap. Maybe crowdfunding, which I confess I have no experience of. One thing is for sure, we need to continue wanting to preserve our way of life in our countryside. But to do that, we've got to smarten up our act before we organise publicity outside this room with TV, radio and newspapers, which will welcome the opportunity to cover it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I think it's your turn.
Thank you. Evening, everybody. Gosh, I don't know about you, but I've learned a lot already from the esteemed comments. I recall Gavin and I met with our Chief Fire Officer getting on for maybe 2.5 years ago now, because it was this is a big deal right across the county. I probably had as much correspondence from residents about this particular issue, certainly on the fire side of my responsibilities, as anything else. I just want to give you a little bit of reassurance, if I may. Providing these sites, particularly the battery electric storage sites, are appropriately designed, that they have access and exit for the fire and rescue appliances, appropriately separated, that they have appropriate sources of water or other materials that are needed, then they can be and are safe. They wouldn't get to this point in planning law if they weren't safe. However, not all developments are presented in a form that would allow that access and allow for the fire and rescue service to do what they need to do if they have to. So the big issue is, are the developers taking the advice of fire and rescue before they put their plans in? And are the planners encouraging, if not requiring, the developers to make that contact? They are not always, I'm afraid to say. The National Police Council, that's the national body that manages the guidance, recognising that fire and rescue services are not statutory consultees to these applications, are very, very much of the opinion that the planners should point all developments in the direction of their local fire and rescue service. And Staffordshire will offer advice. They will look at plans and, if necessary, help to redesign them to the most appropriate form. So my ask of you, actually, as a resident as well as somebody who's got a real interest in keeping this urban creep away from what is the best of Staffordshire, is be relentless in pursuing your local councils, your local councillors who are responsible for planning, to ask their officers, have the developers been in touch with the fire and rescue service? If they haven't, make as big a deal of that as you possibly can. And ask the developers themselves, and let the public know if they haven't. Now, that's being a little bit outside the professional advice I might give, but it's what I would give myself. And I also just want to help manage expectations around this. This is not straightforward. It doesn't matter. We've just heard from Blithfield. You can put together a tremendous campaign. It won't necessarily get you what you want. If the law allows for development to a certain standard, actually, it's not the planning committee's job or the planning officer's job to reject it. Their job is to reject stuff that is not suitable, not within the agreed local plan, or likely to cause unforeseen outcome. So look for those things, but then, unfortunately, we need Gavin's support to try and reverse some of the direction of travel with national policy, which is putting the countryside second to what, well, it needs to be first, doesn't it? It needs to be first and sustainable. The reference to Wally's Quarry was very well made. This is a bit like taking advantage of rural environments in the same way as quarrying, with the risk of walking away from the cleanup. So it might be a long-term problem, not even a short one. I wish you all the very best of luck. This is something I care about a lot, and I think you'll see most people in the room do.
Thank you. Michael, it's over to you, sir.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm Mike Godson. I'm Borough Councillor for Fulford, but more importantly for what we're talking about tonight, I'm a qualified engineer, Fellow of the Institute of Electrical Engineers, ex-Director of Eastern Electricity, and the Managing Director of Eastern Contracting, which was one of the largest electrical contractors in the UK. We built 2 power stations. So let me go through the electrical side. These are called solar farms. I don't like that name. Their right name should be solar power stations. They consist of panels, miles of armoured cable that will be put into the ground to connect each panel up, brought back to the rectifiers, which convert the DC current to AC. You'll have switchgear, you'll have transformers, and these days they all come with batteries as well. And they're supposed to be temporary. Building regulations and standards on equipment that can handle 30 or 50 megawatts does not allow for temporary buildings. There will even be some adherence to earthquake standards. And just in case you've forgotten, 30 megawatts equals 30 million watts. That level of power is dangerous. You put a spanner across the two wires and the arc will burn your skin off 20 feet away. So please do not have any really concern that these are temporary structures that handle it. They can't be. They're supposed to run maintenance free for 40 years under that level of stress. There is a responsibility to connect to the grid from the developer. They often miss out in the development application what electrical voltage they're going to transmit this to the grid at. The one that's been built near Filford is connecting into a 132 kV. That's 132,000 volts. And it's 5 kilometers away. Underground cable at this voltage is extortionately expensive. It will have to go on pylons which are tall enough. In our case, it's been built in Greenbelt. It's got to go across about 3 meters of Greenbelt land, both in moorlands and in Stafford Borough. But more interestingly, it's got to go across 2.5 kilometers of Blythe Bridge. Blythe Bridge has got to have pylons built through the middle of it at sufficient height to carry 132,000 volt cables. Not to mention, it's got to have a crossing of the River Blythe, a crossing of the Derby to Crewe railway line, and they've got to persuade Highways England that it can cross the dual carriageway of the A50, which is pretty much a no-no. You will all have driven lots of motorways and trunk roads. How many have you seen with a high voltage line going across it? You've seen plenty with them running parallel, but how many have you seen running across it? Planners don't seem to take that into account. Now, why have we got so many different developers applying to put stations in? That's because it is so lucrative. You're right. And you will find that these operations, and almost all of the ones on the list of the ones going up in Staffordshire, there is not a single one repeated. And what they will do, they will get it in. Their job is to get it past the planners, and then they will sell it on. They'll also sell on all the planning restrictions that the planners have thoughtfully put on board, which in 40 years' time, when all of us will have died, they will be expecting to get away with not having to do it. They'll probably have been through 5 cycles of company changes, so the planning restriction has become unenforceable. And we have enough trouble with actually getting gypsies off sites they shouldn't be on when it's stark staring in front of you. Now, why is it so lucrative for the planet, for developers? The government has sought to encourage renewable energy. It has brought in a very good scheme that produces a stable income for renewable sites. And it's operated by something called contracts for difference. So if you get more for your electricity, you pay it back to the government. If you get less for your electricity, the government pays you. And if you're not running because they've asked you not to run, they'll pay you anyway. Now, why is that important? There's an organisation called NESO, the National Energy System Operator. They have confirmed that as of 12 months ago, there are 750 gigawatts of projects in for planning. If the grid companies actually wired all these up, that would mean 4 times the amount of power we require to get to net zero by 2030. And if all of them are built, and you can only use a quarter of them, the other 3/4 will be paid for doing nothing. And ladies and gentlemen, we're always doing the good thing, but we already are the highest electricity prices in Europe. If we have to pay for 3/4 of 750 gigawatts on top that we can't use, it will kill our manufacturing industry and even decimate the employment in this country. But our Labour government seems not to have any cognizance of this at all. Who will be doing the restoration in 40 years' time? We've got no idea. The planners will all be dead as well, so they don't care either. There are huge design and operational problems that were alluded to earlier. Our grid system was built when we had a small number of large power stations controlled by CEGB. And they used to tell power stations when to come on and when to go off. And because they were large, there was a huge amount of inertia in the system. Nothing happened very quickly. With renewables, they can be turned off at a switch. Now, you might think that's quite good. But unfortunately, electrical system is very delicate. We all require the power to be at the right voltage within plus or minus 5%, and at the right oscillations, because we all run on alternating current. If it's out, it is dangerous for the system and dangerous for the equipment and dangerous for your equipment in the households as well. If it becomes out beyond the parameters that the grid operator thinks it should be, it has to be shut down. These sites can be shut down at the flick of a switch. If you're not connected, your solar panel won't produce any energy. We have seen recently in the news what happens when we have a sudden change in power structures. It can take a substation out at Heathrow. Heathrow was supplied by 4 substations. It only lost 1, but that was sufficient to take it down for 5 minutes, and it knocked all their systems out. And because of their safety requirements, it took them 10 hours to get back up. We've just seen the same sort of thing happen in the Spanish Peninsula. And that is attributed, but not fully explored yet, to the amount of power that they have got with renewable systems. One was overloaded, went down. It went down, put pressure on the surrounding systems locally, and you had a cascade failure. And the whole of Spain and Portugal went out, and was out, I think, for three days. Mm-hmm. And that's what happens. You have cascade failures when you have this structure. So we don't have the ability to control them because there are going to be thousands of them. When there were only 20 or 30 large power stations, the central electricity board could control them. In constant contact, tell them to go up, come down. And we used to have 2 storage farms, lakes, where it was pumped storage. You pump it up overnight when you've got cheap nuclear electricity, you drop it back down when everybody comes out to put the kettles on at the end of EastEnders. And that's how they tried to control the occasional surges we had in the system. When you've got all these myriad of small ones that are not controlled, they're maintained remotely, they're not manned, it's a recipe for an uncontrollable disaster. And nobody seems to be addressing that. So my point to you is we've got already 4 times the applications than we need. Who is going to sift through these and say which ones are most suitable? Is it going to be the one like we have, which is sat in Greenbelt? It's got to go 5 kilometres over the top of the local town of Blythe Ridge and 3 kilometres over Greenbelt land with permanent structures. 132 kV towers. They are not temporary buildings.
Michael, I'm going to have to interrupt you.
Yeah, I thought you would. I've got an awful lot
I should have
to
done
say
it
about it.
minutes ago.
Yeah. But yes,
Thank you very much.
thank you for being so tolerant.
Adam's got to go, as I explained, he's got to be back in the House of Commons in 5 minutes.
Thankfully,
Can I just say again how appreciative we are that you made this particular effort? And you probably gathered, I'm going to say the next bit when the next two speakers have finished, but just listening and watching the people in the audience, the fact that you've been here to listen as well,
No.
it's huge.
do come back to me as to how we can help, because actually just listening to some people on the decommissioning, you think to yourself, actually, why aren't there any bonds being demanded in order to be able to make sure that decommissioning happens? To hear,
They won't sign.
well, indeed, but
The banks won't give them to them.
but also,
2 minutes.
where are some of the measures? But there's so much that we can actually do, but push at a national scale as well as local scale. Thank you.
Thank you ever so much. A pleasure. Really kind of you.
Thank you so much.
Edward, we've waited long and hard for you. It's your turn.
Thank you very much. Quite a few things have been said that I wanted to say, so I will cut little bits out. All my life, I've been involved in farming and agriculture. I've farmed, studied and taught agriculture. I've also been a driver for 52 years, including tractors, cars and HGVs. I've constructed yards, roads, with concrete and hardcore. Both the developers and the inspectors admitted on a recent application, when a number of us from the local area went with them, they admitted that they had never driven an HGV. And I said, we were talking about it's got two names, Droyton Lane, we'll call it, their way in. We walked down the road and I said, do you seriously think HGVs can get down here? Oh, yes. What weight is coming down here? We don't know. These are the developers, and the inspector did not know the actual weights going down the road. So they wouldn't go all the way up the road. I said, we need to go further around those corners, because I've driven down here in an HGV. I try not to, but I have delivered to local farms. And I don't choose to go down there if I can help it. We stood on a metre diameter gas pipeline that ran underneath the road with red signs on each side. And I said to them, I understand that gas pipeline there is £1,000 per square inch. I said, are you bothered? We're not bothered. We're not interested. That is a massive gas pipeline. I have seen it. I can crawl through that. I can crawl through that with one or two of you on my back. It's that big. I've seen it. So they're not bothered. They're not interested. Now, we also pointed out that we got major electric pylons. We were going to have a major electric battery very close to the pylons. We got an oil pipeline running very close. We got this major gas pipeline. We got Chartley Moss. And they didn't seem to think there was any fire risk whatsoever. I am telling you that if a terrorist wanted to pick a spot and hit that point, they would cut out most of the West Midlands for their electricity and their gas, as it's still running at the moment. But that didn't seem to bother them. They hadn't even thought about it. We then asked them how the local residents are going to get in and out. They didn't know. That's got to be worked out after we got the planning. And I said, we want to know now. How are you going to get these people in? They didn't really know, but it's 1.9 miles and they're going to have traffic lights at each end. And some way they actually believed down this little tiny road, which they've never driven an HGV down. I have, as I said. They actually believed that the local residents could get in and out without any trouble whatsoever, which is crazy. They weren't practical. They are not practical people. They just have a theory. I mean, I've also agreed that they should be on roofs. There's plenty of room on roofs, but I'm going to conclude. I'm going to say that I believe solar farms revolution is a white elephant. It presents threats to the health and well-being of the local people and communities, threaten to our security, and it is actually a fact that grassland, if it hasn't got solar panels on, and other crops, but grassland in the main consumes more carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere than even trees. That is fact. That is a scientific fact. We put solar panels on this land. We're not going to grow any crops. All crops need carbon dioxide. They soak it up, take it away. It gets recycled, we know. Grassland actually puts it in the soil. That is a fact. And it has been for years. I was taught that in 1975. Scientists have repeated that. And they say grassland takes up so much carbon dioxide. However, grass doesn't grow very well underneath solar panels. It hardly grows at all. And I agree with Stephen that grass needs sugar. It needs sunlight to produce sugar, or else animals don't eat it. So the idea that animals will eat grass on there is just a fantasy. Anyway, I'd like to conclude on that. Thank you very much.
Last but not least, Eunice.
Okay, well, I'd like to say we've already heard tonight that there is 400% more energy than we actually need in the pipeline of all these developments. So are these solar panels going to become redundant before we've even started? Has the government, and in particular Ed Miliband, lost the plot? He's pen happy. He says yes, 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 and yes again. Does he understand how these schemes will blight large areas of wonderful Staffordshire countryside for the next 40 years and create a nightmare for my grandchildren to have to resolve in 40 years' time? This is a national problem, not just local, and we need to fight for common sense and educate the general public in the problems we have with a national media campaign, and we need to launch a campaign to inform and educate as many people as possible to create a future for the next generation. Why are we so popular in Staffordshire? It's quite simple. We're very close to Rugeley Power Station and the connectivity there is readily available. What a local farmer told me only the other day, one of my neighbours, that he had been contacted on 70 occasions by developers in the last year to take up his land. Some of these developers have contacted him every other month to try and persuade him yet again to take up the option. This is serious pester power. Many agricultural advisors have been suggesting to farmers for the last 40 years we need to do farm diversification. Farmers have been brought up over the last few years with the term farm diversification, but it usually means farming people. This type of diversification is possibly farming a disaster for the future. I'm very worried about the infrastructure. 60 years ago, farmers in this area, and I wasn't living here then, experienced the installation of a high pressure gas pipeline. However, I was born near Stowe and lived in the hamlet of Lower Moddershall, 3 houses and a farm. I sadly have personal experiences of the disaster of the gas pipeline. On my parents' land, the contractors were carrying out major works, repair works on the gas pipeline. We had hundreds of lorries down the road, and they managed to fracture a main water pipe. We were without mains water for 48 hours. Can you imagine the crisis my late parents faced to keep cattle alive? A dairy cow needs between 80 and 100 gallons of water a day to stay alive. We had no water for 48 hours. My father's hair turned grey in the crisis, but all he could keep saying to us, and this is very true, it's a good job it was the water pipe and not the gas pipeline, because we would have been no more. Even the developers don't know if the one-way traffic system will work. The developers have asked if it would work, but I'm sorry to say the idiots at the Staffordshire County Council, and I apologise to our councillors that are here, who've been out and assessed the road, have not assessed it properly. There is no way we can have all these heavy goods vehicles going through the lanes for approximately 6 months on the first development. It's totally unfair to expect residents to guess which way the traffic's coming and then take a gamble and go out of their property. And what will they have to do? Stay there till the construction traffic have gone home and probably go out at night. This is just not acceptable. Will the roads become dangerous and will they crack? Cracks appear. Will the gas pipeline be fractured? We're next to a lithium battery storage. Will Jointon and Grinley be no more? Left, the only thing I can think of is that if this happens, we'll definitely make national news for none of the right reasons. The government seem to blatantly ignore residents' feelings and warnings that are given by local parishioners. We are already experiencing a lack of farming livestock in the country, which is partly attributed to solar farms. Prices have doubled for livestock last year. I buy cade lambs in for the last 10 years, and this year they've doubled in price. Everyone's buying sheep to graze on solar panel fields. This, in my opinion, is short-lived. And the grass under the solar panels will not be good enough for sheep to eat and be terribly bitter. I believe the quad bike and the mower will take over, as is already being proved by the quad bike maintenance man who told me last week this is what's happening. Can I conclude by saying quite simply, if we survive the installation of all these solar farms in the hamlet of Droyton and Grinley, and we are not blown out by a fractured gas line, who is proving if we need all this energy? It's certainly not Ed Miliband. We have thousands of roofs here around the area. I'm considering putting solar panels on my roofs at Amerton Farm because I feel it's the right thing to be doing. Why should we look forward to possibly the prospect of 80% of the hamlet of Droyton and Grinley and being under solar panels? This then, joined with the other development at Blissfield, which Peter's talked about, will mean 5.23 miles of continuous solar panels. Our prospects are pretty bleak. Do you not agree? I need to rest my case. We need action, help and understanding to resolve the massive crisis. When will the government of ours wake up and what is happening to what is happening around them?
Tell a good chairman because you hit the time deadlines. I